What made you let your child become homeless? My son Dylan dropped out of college halfway through his junior year, claiming he needed to focus on his art full time. This lasted for 18 months. Every morning, I'd wake up at 6 a.m. for my nursing shift while he slept until 2 p.m. I'd come home exhausted to find him lounging on my couch eating food I bought while his dirty dishes covered every surface. He'd leave his art supplies scattered across the dining room table, then act annoyed when I needed to use it for actual meals. "You're stressing my creative energy," he'd say when I asked him to clean up. He treated me like hired help. I'd do his laundry because leaving it piling up in his room made the whole house smell. I'd cook dinner every night, then watch him inhale it without even a thank you before disappearing back to his studio, which was really just my guest room filled with half-finished paintings and empty energy drink cans. When I suggested he get a part-time job to help with expenses, he'd roll his eyes and remind me that I was the one who always encouraged him to follow his dreams. His art hadn't sold a single piece, but I kept buying him expensive paints and canvases to support him. Every week I'd drive him to the art supply store and watch him load up the cart with materials that cost more than my grocery budget. He'd use my car for everything since he didn't have one, leaving it with an empty gas tank every time. The worst part was how he'd invite his artist friends over for these creative sessions where they'd drink my wine and eat my food while brainstorming ideas that never led anywhere. They'd spread paint and charcoal across my dining room table discussing their latest projects while I cleaned up after them. These sessions would run until 3 a.m. with them playing loud music while I had to work the next morning. He had this way of making me feel guilty for having basic expectations, like I was the unreasonable one for wanting my adult son to contribute something to the household he was destroying. One evening I came home early from work with a migraine and found them using my good kitchen knives to scrape paint off canvases. The blades were completely ruined. When I confronted them about it, his friend laughed and said, "Maybe don't buy such expensive stuff if you're going to freak out about people actually using it." Dylan nodded along like this made perfect sense. That night I couldn't sleep because of their noise, so I went downstairs for some tea. I heard them talking in the living room and froze when I heard my name. One of his friends asked, "Why is your mom so uptight about everything?" "She's just bitter," Dylan replied. "She's jealous that I'm following my dreams while she's stuck in some dead-end job wiping old people's asses. She peaked in high school and she keeps trying to drag me down to her level." They all laughed and another friend said, "At least you don't have to pay rent." Dylan's response made my blood boil. Exactly. Why would I pay to live with someone who gave up on life? She should be grateful I'm even here keeping her pathetic existence interesting. Without me, she'd just be some sad nurse who comes home to an empty house every night. The cruel laughter that followed felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I stood there realizing that everything I'd sacrificed for him meant nothing. I wasn't his mother anymore. I was just a free meal ticket he openly mocked. The next day, while Dylan was out with his friends, I called a locksmith. I packed all his belongings into garbage bags and left them on the front porch. When he got back and found himself locked out, he started pounding on the door. "You can't just kick me out. I'm your son." I spoke to him through the door and told him he was an adult, and it was time he learned to take care of himself. He tried everything from fake tears to angry threats. I was just joking around with my friends. "You know I don't really think those things about you," but I'd heard the genuine cruelty in his voice. "I'll get a job, I promise. I'll change." The desperation was real now, but it was too late. "You've had 18 months to change, Dylan. Figure it out." 3 weeks later, Dylan called me sobbing. He'd burned through every friend who'd let him crash on their couch. Nobody wanted a house guest who didn't clean up after himself or contribute anything. His art career collapsed when he couldn't afford supplies or studio space. He took a job at a fast food restaurant, but got fired after a week for showing up late and having an attitude. "Please let me come home. I've learned my lesson." But I'd learned mine too. I told him I loved him, but he needed to figure out his own life. Last month, I drove past a homeless shelter and saw him sitting outside looking defeated. For a moment, I felt bad, but then I remembered his words about my pathetic existence.